5 days before the wedding, Sebastian dropped the bomb, "I can't marry you." But what he never expected was that destiny was already closing in, and the price he'd pay would shatter everything. What happened next destroyed lives, and will leave you gasping. Welcome back, my amazing family and friends. If you're ready to dive into this unforgettable story, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll bring you another incredible tale you absolutely can't miss. Let's get started, and don't forget to like and share to help our community grow. The late April sun filtered through the leaded windows of the Grand Café on High Street, casting geometric patterns across the marble table where Ophelia Hartwell sat with her wedding planner's portfolio spread before her. Her fingers traced the embossed gold lettering on the invitation mock-up, "Mr. and Mrs. Richard Hartwell request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their daughter, Ophelia Catherine, to Mr. Sebastian James Rothschild." She smiled, though her chest felt oddly tight. 5 more days. Just 5 more days until she became Mrs. Rothschild. "The lilies have been confirmed for Christ Church," she murmured to herself, checking off another item on her impossibly long list. The string quartet knows to arrive by 2. The champagne is the Bollinger 2008 vintage Sebastian insisted on. Everything was perfect. Everything had to be perfect. Because that's what Sebastian expected. That's what Sebastian deserved. Ophelia had spent the last 3 years of her life learning exactly what Sebastian Rothschild expected from the world, and more specifically, from her. He expected excellence. He expected beauty. He expected a woman who could stand beside him at charity galas in London, who knew which fork to use at state dinners, who could smile graciously while his business associates made barely veiled comments about how he'd done well for himself in choosing her. She'd met him during her final year reading English literature at Magdalen College. He'd been the guest speaker at a university fundraiser, 32 years old, devastatingly handsome, with a fortune built on tech investments that had made him one of Britain's youngest billionaires. She'd been 21, wide-eyed, and entirely unprepared for the way he'd looked at her across the crowded hall in the examination school's building. "You're different from the others," he'd said when he'd approached her later that evening, champagne flute in hand. "You're not trying so hard." She'd laughed. "Maybe because I'm not trying at all. I'm only here because my father insisted. He's on the college board." Richard Hartwell's daughter. Sebastian's eyes had lit with recognition. The professor of medieval history. That's him. More interested in people who've been dead 6 centuries than in living ones, most days. She'd said it with affection, but Sebastian had nodded as if understanding something profound. "My father was like that. Except his obsession was profit margins instead of history." He'd paused. He died 2 years ago. The vulnerability in that moment had hooked her completely. Here was this powerful, wealthy man, and he'd chosen to share something real with her, something that hurt. Now, sitting in the cafe where they'd had their first official date 3 years ago, Ophelia wondered when that vulnerability had vanished. When had Sebastian stopped sharing his fears and started simply issuing pronouncements? When had she stopped being his partner and become another item on his list of acquisitions? "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "Pre-wedding jitters. That's all this is." Her phone buzzed. Sebastian's name appeared on the screen. "Sebastian, need to see you. My place. 6 p.m. Important. Not can we meet, or I miss you." Just a summons. Ophelia typed back, "I'm finalizing details with the florist until 7. Can it wait until tonight?" The response came immediately, "No. Cancel the florist. 6 p.m. She stared at the message, that tightness in her chest intensifying. In 3 years, she'd learned to read Sebastian's moods through his texts. This wasn't his usual brusque efficiency. This was something else. Something cold. Sebastian Rothschild stood in the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse overlooking the Oxford skyline, watching the spires of the university pierce the afternoon sky. From here, he could see everything: the Radcliffe Cameras Dome, the towers of All Souls College, the gentle curve of the Cherwell River as it wound through the meadows. He'd conquered this city. At 35, he owned 3 of its most prestigious properties, sat on the boards of 4 major tech firms, and had an investment portfolio that made grown men weep with envy. In 5 days, he would marry a woman whom everyone agreed was perfect for him: beautiful, educated, from a respectable family, gracious in public. So why did he feel like he was walking toward a prison cell? "You're making a mistake." The voice came from behind him. Sebastian didn't turn. Your opinion has been noted, Marcus. His best friend and business partner, Marcus Waverley, moved to stand beside him. They'd known each other since their days at Eton, had built their first company together in a cramped flat in London before Sebastian's investments had made them both wealthy beyond measure. She loves you, Marcus said quietly. Actually, loves you. Do you know how rare that is for men like us? Men like us. Sebastian's laugh was bitter. You mean men whose bank accounts are more interesting than their personalities? I mean men who've forgotten how to be vulnerable. Men who've turned their hearts into balance sheets. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Ophelia sees you, Seb. The real you. Or at least, she used to, before you started treating her like a business merger. Sebastian's jaw tightened. I'm not discussing this. Then what am I doing here? You called me, remember? Said you needed to talk before tonight. Tonight. When Ophelia would arrive at 6 o'clock, expecting to discuss some last-minute wedding detail. When instead, he would end everything. The decision had been crystallizing for weeks, though he'd fought against acknowledging it. Every time he looked at Ophelia's hopeful face, every time she excitedly shared some wedding plan, he'd felt the walls closing in. Marriage meant vulnerability. It meant giving someone the power to hurt you, to leave you, to die and take part of you with them like his mother had died when he was 12, leaving his father a hollow shell. Better to end it now. Clean. Surgical. Before he was in too deep. Before you're in too deep. A voice in his head mocked. You proposed to her. You've been planning this wedding for 8 months. But he'd proposed because it was what successful men did at his age. They married appropriate women. They built dynasties. He'd been following a script, and only now was he realizing he didn't want the life that script led to. I'm calling it off, he said abruptly. The wedding. Everything. Marcus went very still. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? Jesus Christ, Sebastian. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. 5 days before the wedding? 5 days? Do you have any idea what this will do to her? She'll be upset. But she'll recover. She's young. Beautiful. She'll find someone else. Someone else. Marcus's voice rose. You really have turned into a sociopath, haven't you? This isn't a business deal falling through. This is a woman who's been planning her entire future around you. Sebastian finally turned to face his friend. Which is exactly the problem. She's built her entire identity around being my wife. That's not healthy. I'm doing her a favor. A favor. Marcus stared at him. You're delusional. You're not doing this for her. You're doing this because you're terrified. I'm not terrified. I'm being rational. Your father's death messed you up more than you admit, Marcus said quietly. You watched him stop living after your mother died. But Ophelia isn't your mother. And you're not your father. You're choosing to be alone. I'm choosing to be free. Marcus shook his head slowly. One day, Sebastian, you're going to realize what you threw away. And I hope to God that when that day comes, it's not too late. Ophelia arrived at Sebastian's penthouse at precisely 6 o'clock. She changed from her casual afternoon outfit into a soft blue dress that Sebastian had once said brought out her eyes. She'd touched up her makeup, practiced her smile in the car's mirror. Whatever this is, we'll work through it, she told herself. Couples have rough patches. That's normal. The doorman waved her through with a sympathetic look that she didn't understand. The elevator ride to the top floor felt longer than usual, her stomach fluttering with an anxiety she couldn't name. Sebastian opened the door before she could knock. He looked distant. That was the only word for it. As if he were already somewhere else, somewhere she couldn't follow. Come in, he said, and even his voice sounded different. Formal. Like she was a business associate rather than his fiancée. What do you think is going through Ophelia's mind as she steps into the penthouse? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The penthouse was immaculate, as always. Minimalist furniture, expensive art on the walls, everything in shades of grey and white. She tried, once, to suggest adding some color, maybe some throw pillows, some photographs, but Sebastian had smiled tightly and said he preferred clean lines. She realized now that she'd never really lived here, despite staying over countless nights. This was Sebastian's space, and she'd always been a visitor. Would you like some wine? He asked, already walking toward the bar. Sebastian, what's going on? Your text sounded urgent. He poured himself a whiskey instead of wine. Neat. She watched his hand, looking for a tremor, some sign of emotion. But his grip was steady. Sit down, Ophelia. She remained standing. I'd rather not. Just tell me what this is about. He turned to face her, and she saw it then, the decision already made, the walls already built, the bridge already burned. I can't marry you, he said. The words hung in the air between them. Simple. Devastating. Final. Ophelia's first thought was absurd, but the flowers have been ordered. Her second thought, this isn't real. This is a nightmare. Her third thought, I can't breathe. What? The word came out as barely a whisper. The wedding. I can't go through with it. I'm sorry, but I've realized I'm not ready for marriage. I may never be ready. She stared at him, waiting for the punchline, the just kidding, the reveal that this was some awful joke. But Sebastian just stood there, expensive whiskey in hand, face carefully neutral. You're ending our engagement? 5 days before our wedding. I know the timing is terrible. Terrible. Her voice broke. Sebastian, there are 300 people expecting to see us get married on Saturday. My dress is hanging in my flat. The cake has been made. She stopped, because suddenly none of that mattered. I love you. Something flickered across his face. Pain? Regret? But it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. I know you do, he said. And I care about you, Ophelia. Very much. But caring isn't the same as being ready to spend a lifetime together. Care about me. She felt something inside her crack. 3 months ago, you stood in front of your entire board of directors and called me the love of your life. I got caught up in the moment. 8 months ago, you got down on one knee in the Bodleian Library, our library, where we spent so many afternoons, and you told me you couldn't imagine your future without me. I was wrong. 2 words. That's all it took to erase 3 years. Ophelia wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the room. Is there someone else? No. Then what changed? What did I do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. He set down his glass. This is about me, not you. The cliché of it, the sheer, insulting banality of that phrase, made her laugh. It came out harsh, almost hysterical. It's not you, it's me. Really, Sebastian? That's what you're going with? It's the truth. The truth, she repeated. You want truth? Here's truth. You're a coward. You're standing in your perfect penthouse with your perfect whiskey, and you're throwing away something real because you're too afraid to actually feel something. His expression hardened. I'm being honest with you. I'm not the man you think I am. I'm not capable of being the husband you deserve. Then why did you propose? Why did you let me fall in love with you? Why did you let me plan a future that you never intended to give me? Her voice was rising, cracking. Why did you waste 3 years of my life? I'm sorry. You're sorry. She laughed again, and this time tears came with it. Do you have any idea what I've given up for you? I turned down a doctorate program at Cambridge because you said you needed me here in Oxford. I took a position at a secondary school teaching bored teenagers about Shakespeare instead of pursuing research I actually cared about. I moved into a flat I hate because it's close to your office. I became smaller and smaller, Sebastian, because you needed so much space. No one asked you to do those things. The casual cruelty of it stole her breath. You're right, she said softly. No one asked. I just loved you. Stupid me. She pulled the engagement ring from her finger, the 3-carat diamond that had been in his family for generations, and set it on the marble countertop with a soft clink. Ophelia. Don't. She held up her hand. Don't you dare say my name like it means something to you now. She walked toward the door on legs that didn't feel quite steady. Her hand was on the handle when his voice stopped her. You'll be fine. You're strong. You'll move on and find someone who can give you what you need. She turned back to look at him one last time. He stood in his penthouse, surrounded by all his money and success and carefully controlled life, and he looked exactly like what he was, a man who'd chosen safety over love. I hope it was worth it, she said. All this protection you've built around your heart. I hope it keeps you warm at night. Then Ophelia Hartwell walked out of Sebastian Rothschild's penthouse and his life, and she didn't look back. The days that followed existed in a blur that Ophelia would later struggle to remember clearly. There was the phone call to her parents, her mother's gasp of horror, her father's quiet rage. There were the hundreds of notifications that had to be sent. The wedding was off, no explanation provided, please don't ask questions. There was the humiliation of facing her colleagues at St. Hilda's Grammar School, their pitying glances and whispered conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered the staff room. There was the return of wedding gifts, each package a small death. There was the wedding dress, still hanging in her flat like a ghost, which she couldn't bring herself to look at, much less dispose of. And there were the nights. Long, hollow nights where she lay in bed and wondered how she'd been so blind. How had she not seen that Sebastian was pulling away? How had she mistaken his distance for pre-wedding stress instead of what it really was, abandonment in slow motion? 3 weeks after Sebastian ended their engagement, Ophelia sat in her cramped flat in Jericho, staring at her bank statement. The flat she'd rented to be close to Sebastian's office cost more than half her teaching salary. She'd been managing because she'd assumed that after the wedding, finances wouldn't matter anymore. Sebastian had even offered to help with rent multiple times, but she'd refused, clinging to some vestige of independence. Now that pride seemed foolish. Her mobile rang. Unknown number. Miss Hartwell? This is Patricia Chen from Blackwell Publishing. We met briefly at the Oxford Literary Festival last spring. Ophelia vaguely remembered, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s who'd been impressed by Ophelia's presentation on feminist themes in medieval literature. I'm calling about a rather unusual opportunity, Patricia continued. We're launching a new series of accessible academic texts, and we need someone to write a book on women in Arthurian legend. Your name came up in our editorial meeting. The contract would include a significant advance, enough to live on for a year while you write. Would you be interested in discussing this further? Ophelia's hand tightened on the phone. When would you need an answer? We'd need the manuscript completed in 10 months. I know it's aggressive, but I'll do it. Don't you want to know the details? The advance amount, I'll do it, Ophelia repeated. Whatever the terms are, I'll make it work. There was a pause. Are you quite all right, Miss Hartwell? I'm perfect, Ophelia said, and for the first time in 3 weeks, she meant it. When can we meet? 6 months later, Sebastian stood in the ballroom of the Randolph Hotel, champagne flute in hand, feeling nothing. Around him, Oxford's elite mingled and networked at the Autumn Charity Gala, the same event where he'd first met Ophelia 4 years ago. Marcus appeared at his elbow. You look miserable. I'm fine. You've been fine for 6 months. It's getting boring. Marcus sipped his drink. Have you spoken to her? Sebastian didn't need to ask who. No. She's doing remarkably well, from what I hear. Rebecca saw her at a bookshop event last month. Apparently, she's writing a book. Looked happy. Something sharp twisted in Sebastian's chest. He ignored it. Good for her. You're an idiot. So you keep saying. Because it keeps being true. Marcus set down his glass. I saw the way you looked when I mentioned her name. You miss her. I made the right decision. Did you? Because from where I'm standing, you've spent 6 months working yourself half to death and attending events where you stare at walls and pretend to be interested in conversations about market trends. Sebastian's jaw tightened. I'm networking. You're hiding. There's a difference. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. For what it's worth, I think you broke your own heart just as badly as you broke hers. The difference is, she's healing. You're just existing. Before Sebastian could respond, a commotion near the ballroom entrance drew their attention. The crowd was parting, whispers rippling through the room. And then Sebastian saw her. Ophelia. She wore a deep emerald gown that hugged her curves before flowing to the floor, her dark hair swept up in an elegant twist. But it wasn't the dress or the hair that made Sebastian's breath catch. It was the way she carried herself, head high, shoulders back, a quiet confidence radiating from her that he'd never seen before. She wasn't the woman who'd left his penthouse in tears 6 months ago. This woman was someone new. Someone who'd been forged in fire and emerged stronger. And she wasn't alone. A man walked beside her, tall, distinguished, probably in his early 40s, with the easy smile of someone comfortable in his own skin. His hand rested lightly on the small of Ophelia's back as they moved through the crowd, and she laughed at something he said, her face lighting up in a way that sent a spike of something dark and possessive through Sebastian's chest. "That's Dr. James Ashford," Marcus said quietly. "Visiting professor from Cambridge. Medievalist, like Ophelia's father. Word is they've been spending quite a bit of time together, his consulting on her book." Sebastian couldn't look away. Ophelia and this James Ashford were moving through the crowd, greeting people, and everyone seemed delighted to see her. When had she known all these people? When had she become the center of attention rather than standing quietly at his side? She turned, scanning the room, and her eyes landed on Sebastian. For a moment, time stopped. He waited for her to look away, to pretend she hadn't seen him, to give him some sign that he still had the power to hurt her. Instead, Ophelia smiled. It was polite, distant, the smile you'd give an acquaintance, not someone you'd once planned to marry. Then she turned back to James Ashford and continued her conversation, dismissing Sebastian as if he were nothing more than a piece of furniture. The casual indifference of it was worse than anger would have been. "I need air," Sebastian muttered, setting down his champagne. He pushed through the crowd toward the terrace, ignoring the people trying to catch his attention for networking opportunities. The night air was cool against his face, the sounds of the party muffled behind him. "She's moved on," he told himself. "That's what you wanted. For her to be fine." But seeing her actually be fine, better than fine, thriving, felt like a knife to the gut. "Sebastian Rothschild. I wasn't certain you'd be here." He turned to find Ophelia standing in the terrace doorway, arms crossed, that same polite smile on her face. "Ophelia." His voice came out rougher than intended. "You look happy," she supplied. "I am. Thank you for noticing." The formality was excruciating. This woman had once known every inch of his body, had laughed at his terrible jokes, had held him when nightmares about his mother's death woke him at 3 a.m. Now she spoke to him like a stranger. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said. "Why not? I've always attended this gala. Just because you broke up with me doesn't mean I lose access to Oxford society." She moved to stand at the terrace railing, looking out over the city lights. "Though I suppose you assumed I'd hide away in shame. I never wanted you to feel ashamed. No, you just wanted me to cease existing in your world. Much cleaner that way." She glanced at him. "How have you been, Sebastian? You look tired." The false concern in her voice stung more than genuine anger would have. "I'm fine. Business is good." "Business?" She laughed softly. "Of course. What else would matter? What would you say to an ex who broke your heart if you ran into them 6 months later? Share your thoughts below." Silence stretched between them, filled with everything they weren't saying. "I heard you're writing a book," Sebastian said finally. "You heard correctly. It's about women in Arthurian legend, Guinevere, Morgan Le Fay, the Lady of Shalott. All the women who were defined by the men in their stories until they chose to write their own narratives." She met his eyes deliberately. "It's been quite therapeutic, actually." He deserved that barb. He knew he did. "And the man you came with? James." Her smile turned genuine. "He's brilliant. Cambridge's youngest full professor in medieval studies. He's been invaluable for research." She paused. "He's also kind, emotionally available, and capable of commitment. Imagine that." The knife twisted deeper. "Ophelia, he stopped. What could he possibly say? "I'm sorry" seemed laughably inadequate. "I made a mistake" would be self-serving. "I miss you" would be cruel. "You what, Sebastian?" She turned to face him fully. "You're sorry? You didn't mean it? You want me back?" She shook her head. "It doesn't matter. I'm not the woman you discarded 6 months ago. She died when you looked her in the eye and said she wasn't worth fighting for. The woman standing here now? She's someone new. Someone who knows her worth. And that woman wouldn't touch you with a 10-foot pole. I never said you weren't worth fighting for. You didn't have to say it. You showed me when you chose your fear over our future." She moved toward the door, then paused. "Do you want to know the worst part? I spent weeks trying to figure out what I did wrong. Was I too clingy? Not interesting enough? Too ordinary for the great Sebastian Rothschild? But then I realized, it was never about me. You're just a coward who prefers being alone to being vulnerable. Ophelia. We're done here. Enjoy your evening, Sebastian. Enjoy your entire life, actually, the one you chose. The lonely one. She walked back into the ballroom, back to James Ashford's side, back to a life that no longer included Sebastian. And Sebastian stood on the terrace, watching through the glass as she laughed at something James said, as she rested her hand on his arm with easy familiarity, as she moved through the crowd like she belonged there, which she did, had always done, he'd just been too blind to see it. Marcus appeared beside him again. Well, that looked painful. Shut up, Marcus. She's different. Stronger. She doesn't need you anymore. I'm aware. The question is, Marcus continued relentlessly, does that bother you because your ego is bruised, or because you're realizing what you lost? Sebastian didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the truth was worse than either option. He'd thought breaking off the engagement would set him free. Instead, he'd locked himself in a prison of his own making, and the only person who'd had the key was now walking away with someone else. 2 weeks later, Sebastian sat in his office at Rothschild Ventures, trying to focus on quarterly reports. The numbers blurred together. His assistant had commented twice that week that he seemed distracted. He was distracted. Ever since seeing Ophelia at the gala, he couldn't stop thinking about her. About the way she'd looked at him with such cool indifference. About the confidence she'd radiated. About James Ashford's hand on her back. His mobile buzzed. Marcus. Marcus, turn on BBC News. Now. Sebastian frowned but pulled up the news feed on his computer. The headline made his blood run cold. Tragic accident on M40. Multiple casualties. He scanned the article. A lorry had jackknifed on the motorway that morning during rush hour. Several vehicles involved. Multiple fatalities. Names being withheld pending family notification. His phone rang. Marcus, voice tight, Sebastian. Have you heard from Ophelia? His heart stopped. What? Why would I? James Ashford was driving to London this morning for a conference. He takes the M40. And Ophelia, Marcus's voice broke. Rebecca said Ophelia mentioned yesterday she was going with him. Something about visiting the British Library. No. No, no, no. Sebastian was on his feet, grabbing his keys. Which hospital? John Radcliffe. But Sebastian, you need to prepare yourself. He didn't hear the rest. He was already running. The John Radcliffe Hospital emergency department was chaos. Sebastian pushed through, ignoring protocols, searching desperately for someone who could tell him anything. I'm looking for Ophelia Hartwell, he demanded at the nurse's station. She would have been brought in from the M40 accident. Sir, I need you to calm down. Where is she? His voice cracked. Please. I need to know if she's alive. The nurse's expression softened. Are you family? He should say no. He had no right to be here. But he said, yes. I'm her fiancé. It was a lie that had once been truth, and now would never be true again. The nurse consulted her computer. She's in surgery. That's all I can tell you right now. Room 3, surgical ward. There's a waiting area. Sebastian was already moving. The surgical waiting room was sterile and cold. He paced, unable to sit, his mind conjuring increasingly horrible images. Ophelia broken. Ophelia dying. Ophelia gone from the world, and the last words he'd said to her were hollow justifications for breaking her heart. His phone kept buzzing. Marcus, his assistant, board members wondering where he was for the afternoon meeting. He ignored all of them. 3 hours. He waited 3 hours that felt like years. Finally, a surgeon emerged, still in scrubs, exhaustion evident in every line of her face. Family of Ophelia Hartwell. Sebastian stepped forward. How is she? The surgeon studied him. You're the fiancé. Yes. Another lie. Or was it? In his heart, hadn't she always been his, even after he'd pushed her away? She's stable. Multiple fractures, left arm, several ribs, hairline fracture of the skull. Significant internal bruising. She was lucky, if you can call it that. Another few inches and the impact would have been fatal. The surgeon's expression grew grim. The driver wasn't so fortunate. Mr. Ashford was pronounced dead at the scene. The world tilted. James Ashford was dead. The kind, emotionally available man who'd made Ophelia laugh. Dead. And Ophelia had been in the car. Had seen it happen. Had nearly died herself. "Can I see her?" Sebastian's voice was barely a whisper. "She's in recovery. Sedated. It'll be hours before she wakes, and when she does, she'll need calm, quiet. Please. I need to see her. I need to know she's alive." He needed to see her breathing. The surgeon hesitated, then nodded. 5 minutes. Room 312. Ophelia looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, her skin pale against the white sheets, machines beeping steadily around her. Her left arm was in a cast, her face bruised, a bandage wrapped around her head, and 4 dripped steadily into her right hand. But her chest rose and fell. She was breathing. She was alive. Sebastian sank into the chair beside her bed, his legs no longer able to support him. He reached out, then stopped, his hand hovering over hers. He had no right to touch her. No right to be here at all. But he couldn't leave. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "God, Ophelia, I'm so sorry. For everything. For being a coward. For throwing away the best thing that ever happened to me. For not realizing until it was too late that you weren't just something I wanted. You were everything I needed." She didn't stir. The sedation kept her under, mercifully unaware of pain, of loss, of the man who'd broken her heart now sitting vigil at her bedside. "I don't know if you can hear me. But if you can, fight. Please fight. Come back. The world needs you in it. I need." His voice broke. "I need you to be okay. Even if you never forgive me. Even if you hate me forever. Just be okay." He stayed until a nurse gently told him visiting hours were over, that he needed to let the patient rest. He left his mobile number with strict instructions to call him the moment, the very second, Ophelia woke. Then Sebastian Rothschild walked out of the hospital into the evening air, and for the first time since his mother's death 23 years ago, he wept. Ophelia woke to pain. It radiated through her body in waves, sharp in her ribs, throbbing in her arm, a dull ache behind her eyes. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was or why everything hurt. Then it came rushing back, the conference in London, James's driving, his laugh at something she'd said about medieval courtly love being the original romantic comedy, the lorry jackknifing across the motorway, the screech of brakes, James shouting her name, the impact. James. She tried to sit up, gasping as pain lanced through her ribs. "Easy, easy." Hands gently pressed her back against the pillows. A nurse's face swam into focus. "You're in hospital, love. You've been in an accident. Don't try to move." "James. Dr. Ashford. Where is he?" But even as she asked, she knew. She'd seen his side of the car crumple. She'd heard the silence after the impact, the terrible silence where his voice should have been. "He's dead, isn't he?" The nurse's expression was answer enough. A sound escaped Ophelia's throat, half sob, half moan. James, who'd been so kind, so patient as she'd healed from Sebastian's betrayal. James, who'd never pushed for more than friendship despite the clear interest in his eyes, who'd respected her need for space and time. James, whose only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong moment, was gone. "I'm so sorry," the nurse said softly. "There's someone here who's been waiting to see you. Says he's your fiancé." Ophelia's blood went cold. "What? A Mr. Rothschild? He's been here since yesterday. Barely left except when we forced him to." "Sebastian. Sebastian was here." "I don't want to see him," Ophelia said flatly. "Tell him to leave." "Are you certain?" He seemed quite worried. "Tell him to leave." Each word hurt her ribs, but she didn't care. "He's not my fiancé. He ended our engagement 7 months ago. Whatever he told you was a lie." The nurse's expression shifted to understanding and sympathy. "I'll have security escort him out if necessary." "Thank you." After the nurse left, Ophelia lay in the sterile hospital room and let herself cry. For James, whose life had been cut short. For herself, broken in a hospital bed. For the bitter irony that Sebastian, who'd walked away when she needed him, had shown up now, when his presence was the last thing she wanted. She didn't want his guilt-driven concern. She didn't want his pity. She wanted him gone from her life completely, the way he'd wanted her gone 7 months ago. Sebastian stood in the hospital corridor, feeling the security guard's hand on his arm, firm but not yet forceful. "Sir, the patient has requested that you leave. I'm going to have to ask you to comply. Just let me see her for 1 minute. Let me make sure she's awake and lucid. She doesn't want to see you." The guard's voice was kind but immovable. "Please don't make this difficult." Marcus appeared at the end of the corridor, taking in the scene with a grim expression. "Come on, Seb. Let's go. I need to see her." "She doesn't want to see you. You need to respect that." The guard nodded approvingly. "Listen to your friend, sir." Sebastian let Marcus lead him away, but not before looking back at the closed door of room 312. Ophelia was behind that door, alive but hurting, and she'd rather suffer alone than have him near her. He'd done this. He'd created this situation where the woman he loved, yes, loved, he could admit it now, would rather face trauma without him than accept his help. Outside the hospital, Marcus steered him toward his car. "You look like hell. When's the last time you slept?" "I don't know. What day is it?" "Thursday. You've been here since Tuesday afternoon." Marcus unlocked his Range Rover. "Get in. You're coming to my place. Rebecca will feed you, and you're going to sleep. I should stay close, in case she changes her mind." "She won't. Not today. Possibly not ever." Marcus pulled into traffic. "You need to accept that the bridge you burned might not be rebuild-able. There has to be a way." "Why? Because now you've decided you want her back? Where was this energy 7 months ago?" Sebastian's hands clenched into fists. "I was an idiot 7 months ago." "Yes, you were. The question is whether you've actually changed, or whether this is just panic because you saw her with someone else and then almost lost her permanently." "I love her." The words came out raw, honest. "I've loved her this entire time. I just couldn't admit it, couldn't let myself be that vulnerable. After my mother died, after watching my father become a shell of himself, I swore I'd never give anyone that kind of power over me. So you pushed away the one person who actually loved you for you, not your money." Marcus shook his head. "Classic self-sabotage. I know that now. Knowing it and being able to fix it are two different things. Ophelia's moved on, Seb. Or at least, she was moving on. This accident will set her back, but she's stronger than you gave her credit for. She rebuilt her life once. She'll do it again. The question is whether that life has room for you in it." Sebastian stared out the window at Oxford's familiar streets. "It won't. Not after what I did." "Probably not," Marcus agreed. "But if you're serious about this, if you actually love her and not just the idea of her, then you'll find a way to help her heal without expecting anything in return. You'll prove through actions, not words, that you've changed. And if she never forgives you, if she never takes you back, you'll accept that too. Because loving someone means wanting them to be happy, even if their happiness doesn't include you." The words settled over Sebastian like a weight. Marcus was right. If he loved Ophelia, truly loved her, he needed to help her through this nightmare without any expectation of redemption or reconciliation. But how could he help someone who refused to even see him? 3 days later, Ophelia's father, Professor Richard Hartwell, sat beside her hospital bed, his weathered face creased with worry. "The doctors say you can be discharged tomorrow, but you'll need someone to stay with you for at least a week. Your mother and I insist you come home to Headington." Ophelia shook her head, immediately regretting it as pain spiked behind her eyes. "I can't. I have too much work. The book manuscript is due in 4 months, and I've lost nearly a week already." "Ophelia Catherine, you were nearly killed. Your manuscript can wait." "It can't, actually. I have a contract. I need the advance to pay rent." She'd been living off the book advance for the past 6 months, supplementing with part-time teaching. James had been helping her arrange access to rare manuscripts at Cambridge. Without him, her research had become significantly more complicated. Without him, everything had become more complicated. "Then stay with us in Headington. You can write there." "Dad, I appreciate it, but I need my own space. My books, my notes, my routine." Her father studied her with the penetrating gaze he usually reserved for recalcitrant students. This is about him, isn't it? About Sebastian. Ophelia's jaw tightened. What about him? He's been calling me. Daily. Asking how you are, if there's anything you need, offering to help with medical bills. I don't want his money. I told him as much. But he's persistent. He seems different. Genuinely distraught. Good. The word came out bitter. Let him be distraught. Let him feel a fraction of what he put me through. Her father reached over and took her uninjured hand. Sweetheart, I'm not defending what he did. Breaking off your engagement days before the wedding was unconscionable. But people can change. People can realize their mistakes. No. Ophelia pulled her hand away. Don't do this. Don't make me the villain for not forgiving him. He made his choice. He chose his fear and his money and his perfect, controlled life over me. Now he gets to live with that choice. What about James? Her father asked quietly. Have you been able to think about him? The change of subject was both relief and agony. I can't stop thinking about him. He was so alive. Dad. So passionate about his work. So kind. And now he's just gone. Because he was driving me to London. If I hadn't asked him. Stop. That's not how this works. The lorry driver fell asleep at the wheel. That's the police report. This was a terrible accident, not your fault. But it felt like her fault. James had been helping her because she'd needed help after losing Sebastian's support, after having to rebuild her entire life. And now James was dead. The world felt like it was crumbling around her. I need to attend his funeral, Ophelia said. When is it? This Saturday. But you're in no condition. I'm going. I don't care what the doctors say. I'm going. Her father recognized the steel in her voice, the same stubbornness that had gotten her through her doctoral research, through teaching in challenging schools, through a broken engagement. All right. But I'm going with you. Thank you. After her father left, Ophelia lay in the hospital bed, watching the evening light fade beyond her window. Her phone sat on the bedside table, full of messages she hadn't been able to face yet. Texts from colleagues, from friends, from her publisher asking if she needed an extension on her deadline. And texts from Sebastian. She'd blocked his number the day after the accident, but somehow he'd found other ways to reach her, through Marcus, through mutual acquaintances, through persistence that would have been touching if she didn't know better. This wasn't love. This was guilt. Sebastian felt guilty that she'd been hurt, guilty that she'd been with James because Sebastian had rejected her first. He was trying to assuage his conscience, not rebuild a relationship. She wouldn't let him. She'd survived his abandonment once. She was still healing from it. She wouldn't give him the power to hurt her again. Have you ever struggled to forgive someone who hurt you deeply? How did you move forward? Share your story in the comments. The funeral was held at Cambridge St. Botolphus Church, a medieval building that James would have appreciated for its historical significance. Ophelia sat in a wheelchair, her father beside her, watching as colleagues and students spoke about James's brilliance, his kindness, his dedication to making medieval history accessible to modern audiences. She should have spoken. She'd known James for months, had worked closely with him. But every time she tried to form words, grief choked them off. After the service, as people gathered in the churchyard for the burial, Ophelia noticed a familiar figure standing apart from the crowd. Sebastian. He wore a black suit, his expression grave, and he wasn't looking at the casket. He was looking at her. Rage flooded through her, hot and immediate. How dare he? This wasn't his place. He hadn't known James. He had no right to be here. She wheeled herself over, ignoring her father's cautioning hand on her shoulder. What are you doing here? She demanded, keeping her voice low despite the fury pounding through her. Sebastian's eyes were red-rimmed, shadowed. I came to pay my respects. You didn't know him. No. But you did. And I wanted to be here in case. He stopped. I wanted to support you. I don't want your support. I want you to leave. Ophelia, please. I know I have no right to be here, no right to speak to you, but... You're right. You don't. So go. I can't. His voice cracked. I can't just walk away when you're in pain. The irony was so sharp it nearly made her laugh. You walked away 7 months ago when I was in pain. When I was devastated. When I needed you most. Now, when it's convenient for your guilt, you want to play the concerned ex-fiancé. It's not about guilt. Then what is it about, Sebastian? Why are you here? Why have you been calling my father, texting my friends, showing up at the hospital? Is this some kind of ego trip? Do you need me to tell you you're forgiven so you can move on with your perfect life? People were starting to stare. A funeral was not the place for this confrontation. Sebastian seemed to realize it too. He stepped closer, voice dropping. I'm here because I was wrong. Because I made the biggest mistake of my life when I let you go. Because I spent 7 months realizing that everything I thought would make me happy, the freedom, the control, the safety, just made me miserable. That's not my problem. I know. You don't owe me anything. But I need you to know that I love you. I've always loved you. I was just too much of a coward to admit it. The words should have meant something. 7 months ago, they would have meant everything. But now, standing in a churchyard at the funeral of a good man who died too young, they felt hollow. You love me, Ophelia repeated. You love me now, when I'm broken and vulnerable and at my lowest. But you didn't love me when I was happy and whole and planning our future. Do you see the problem there? I loved you then too. I just couldn't handle it. And you think you can handle it now? What's changed, Sebastian? Have you magically overcome all your issues with vulnerability and commitment? Or is this just panic because you saw me moving on? He didn't answer, which was answer enough. That's what I thought. Ophelia turned her wheelchair. Stay away from me. I mean it. I don't want to see you, don't want to hear from you. You had your chance, and you threw it away. I'm not giving you another one. Ophelia. We're done. We've been done for 7 months. The only difference now is that you've finally noticed. She wheeled back to her father, leaving Sebastian standing alone in the churchyard, and didn't look back. That night, back in her flat in Jericho, Ophelia sat surrounded by research notes and manuscript pages. Her arm ached, her ribs protested with every breath, but she needed to work. Needed to lose herself in the stories of Guinevere and Morgan and the Lady of Shalott, women who'd been defined by the men in their lives until they'd chosen to write their own narratives. Her laptop screen blurred through tears she refused to shed. A knock at her door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her parents had wanted her to stay with them in Headington, but she'd insisted on coming home, needing the familiar comfort of her own space. Cautiously, she opened the door to find not Sebastian, but Marcus, Sebastian's business partner and friend. Before you slam the door, he said quickly, I'm not here on Sebastian's behalf. I'm here as someone who's known him since we were 14 and wants you to understand what you're dealing with. Ophelia leaned against the doorframe, exhausted. I don't care. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Then I'll leave and never bother you again. Against her better judgment, she stepped aside. Marcus entered her small flat, glancing around at the books and papers scattered everywhere. You're working already? You just got out of hospital. Deadlines don't care about accidents. He nodded, then turned to face her. Sebastian's mother died when he was 12. Brain aneurysm. She was healthy one day, gone the next. His father never recovered. He became this hollow person. Went through the motions of life but never really lived again. Sebastian watched the man who'd been vibrant and strong turn into a shell because he'd loved too deeply and lost. I know this story, Ophelia said tiredly. Sebastian told me about his parents. That doesn't excuse what he did. I'm not excusing it. I'm explaining it. Marcus sat on her worn sofa without invitation. Sebastian spent his entire adult life building walls. Every relationship he had was carefully controlled, kept at arm's length. Then he met you, and for the first time since his mother died, he let himself feel something real. It terrified him. So he ran away. Yes. He sabotaged the best thing in his life because he was convinced that loving you would destroy him the way loving his mother destroyed his father. Ophelia's laugh was bitter. And now? What's changed? He almost lost you. When he heard about the accident, when he thought you might die, he realized that the pain he was trying to avoid by pushing you away was nothing compared to the pain of a world without you in it. That's very poetic. But it doesn't change anything. He broke my heart. Marcus. Not by accident, not in a moment of passion, but deliberately, coldly. He looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't worth the risk. I know. And now I'm supposed to forgive him because he's had an epiphany? Because he's realized what he lost? No, Marcus said quietly. You're not supposed to do anything. Sebastian doesn't expect forgiveness. He doesn't expect you to take him back. All he wants is a chance to prove that he's changed. To help you heal without asking for anything in return. I don't need his help. Maybe not. But he needs to give it. Not for you, for himself. Because if he doesn't find some way to make amends, even knowing you'll never forgive him, then he really will turn into his father. He'll spend the rest of his life as a shell, and that brilliant, maddening, emotionally stunted man will be completely wasted. Ophelia met Marcus's eyes. Why should I care what happens to him? Because despite everything, I think you still love him. And I think you know that he's genuinely changed. The Sebastian who broke up with you 7 months ago would never have shown up at that hospital. He would never have called your father daily. He would never have stood in a churchyard knowing you hated him, just to be there if you needed him. Love isn't enough, Ophelia whispered. I loved him with everything I had, and he still left. You're right. Love isn't enough. Trust is what matters. And he destroyed yours. Marcus stood. I'm not asking you to forgive him. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that people can change. That someone who runs away from love can learn to run toward it instead. After he left, Ophelia sat in her quiet flat, Marcus's words echoing in her mind. She didn't want to consider the possibility that Sebastian had changed. She didn't want to think about the red-rimmed eyes she'd seen at the funeral, the brokenness in his voice when he'd said he loved her. She wanted to hold on to her anger, her pain, because they were protective shields against further hurt. But deep down, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, she knew Marcus was right about one thing. She still loved Sebastian Rothschild. And that made everything so much worse. The weeks that followed were a study in contradiction. Ophelia threw herself into completing her manuscript, spending long hours at her desk despite her doctor's orders to rest. The work became her salvation. Immersing herself in medieval legends meant she didn't have to think about her own life falling apart. James's death had left a gaping hole in her research. He'd been arranging access to rare manuscripts at Cambridge Trinity College Library, connections that died with him. Her publisher was sympathetic but firm. The deadline was in 3 months, and extensions would impact the entire publication schedule. Ophelia was drowning, though she'd never admit it. What she didn't know was that someone was working behind the scenes to throw her a lifeline. It started small. An email from Trinity College. We understand you were working with Dr. Ashford before his tragic passing. His notes indicate you needed access to our Arthurian collection. We'd be honored to continue his work. Please find attached a special researcher's pass, valid for the next 3 months. Then a message from the Bodleian Library. A generous anonymous donation has been made to digitize several key manuscripts you've requested for your research. The scans will be available within the week. A week later, Dr. Margaret Chen, a renowned medievalist Ophelia had only dreamed of consulting, sent an unexpected email. I've heard about your book project and would be delighted to review your chapters. I've cleared space in my schedule for the next 2 months. No fee necessary. Consider it my contribution to ensuring James Ashford's mentorship legacy continues. Each piece of help felt like a miracle. Ophelia accepted gratefully, not questioning too closely how these opportunities had materialized. She was too desperate, too overwhelmed to look the gift horses in the mouth. She worked furiously, her cast-encumbered arm making typing difficult but not impossible. The book was taking shape, a feminist re-examination of Arthurian women who'd been reduced to plot devices in men's stories. Guinevere, whose adultery overshadowed her intelligence and political acumen. Morgan Le Fay, cast as a villain when she was really a powerful woman refusing to submit to patriarchal control. The Lady of Shalott, dying because she dared to look directly at the world instead of through a mirror. The parallels to her own life weren't lost on her. Sebastian sat in his office, reviewing another invoice. The Trinity College donation. The Bodleian digitization project. Dr. Chen's consultation fee that she'd promised not to mention to Ophelia. The medical bills he'd paid anonymously through the hospital's charity fund. In 2 months, he'd spent more money helping Ophelia than he'd spent on their entire engagement. The irony wasn't lost on him. Marcus stood in the doorway, arms crossed. She's going to find out eventually. Maybe. But by then, her book will be finished. That's what matters. You really think she'll forgive you for manipulating things behind her back? I'm not doing this for forgiveness. I'm doing it because she needs help, and I'm in a position to provide it. Sebastian closed his laptop. You said I needed to prove through actions, not words. This is me proving it. By deceiving her. By removing obstacles from her path without demanding credit or gratitude. Isn't that what love is supposed to be? Wanting someone to succeed, even if they never know you helped. Marcus shook his head. You're either incredibly noble or incredibly stupid. I haven't decided which. Probably both. The truth was that helping Ophelia had become Sebastian's sole focus. Work continued, board meetings happened, investments were made, but his heart wasn't in any of it. His heart was in a small flat in Jericho, where a woman with a broken arm and a brilliant mind was writing a book that would probably change medieval literary studies. He'd hired a private investigator, not to stalk Ophelia, but to identify what she needed. Access to manuscripts. Handled. Expert consultation. Arranged. Peace and space to work without financial pressure. He'd anonymously purchased 3 months of her student loan payments. It wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough to make up for what he'd done. But it was something. 10 weeks after the accident, Ophelia submitted her completed manuscript to Blackwell Publishing. She sat in her flat, staring at the confirmation email, feeling both triumph and emptiness. The book was done. 400 pages of research, analysis, and argumentation. Her best work, forged in the fire of grief and pain. James would have been proud. The thought made her chest ache. She dedicated the book to him, for James Ashford, who believed in stories of strong women and lived as a good man. Her phone rang. Patricia Chen from Blackwell. Ophelia. We've done a preliminary read of your manuscript. It's extraordinary. Better than we'd hoped. We want to move up the publication date and increase the first print run. Really? Ophelia's voice came out small, disbelieving. Really? You've written something special here. A book that's academically rigorous but accessible to general readers. The kind of book that could actually make waves. Patricia paused. There's something else. We'd like to host a launch event. Blackwell's main bookshop on Broad Street. We're thinking December, in time for holiday sales. Would you be interested? A book launch. A real, public celebration of her work. Yes, Ophelia said. Yes, I'd be honored. After the call ended, she sat in stunned silence. This was what she'd been working toward for months. Recognition. Success. Proof that she was more than the woman Sebastian Rothschild had left at the altar. So why did success feel so hollow? Because the people she wanted to celebrate with weren't there. James was dead. And Sebastian. Sebastian was a ghost haunting the edges of her life, someone she couldn't quite exorcise no matter how hard she tried. Her doorbell rang. Ophelia opened it to find a delivery man holding an enormous bouquet of white roses, her favorite, though she couldn't remember ever telling anyone that. Delivery for Miss Hartwell. She took the flowers numbly, searching for a card. There was none. But somehow, she knew. Sebastian. The roses sat on her table for 3 days before she could bring herself to throw them away. And even then, she kept one, pressing it between the pages of her manuscript like a bookmark in a story she couldn't quite finish. The book launch was scheduled for the first Friday in December. Ophelia spent the week before in a state of nervous excitement, preparing her remarks, choosing an outfit, trying not to catastrophize about all the ways the event could go wrong. On the Wednesday before the launch, she received an unexpected call from her father. Ophelia, I need to tell you something, and you're going to be angry. Her stomach dropped. What happened? It's about Sebastian. About all the help you've received these past few months, the Trinity College access, the Bodleian digitization, Dr. Chen's consultation. No. No, no, no. He paid for all of it, didn't he? Ophelia's voice was flat. Yes. I only found out yesterday. Marcus let it slip when he thought I already knew. Sebastian's been funding everything behind the scenes. The medical bills, too. And apparently, he's been making anonymous payments on your student loans. Ophelia closed her eyes, fury and something else, something she didn't want to name, warring in her chest. Why would he do that? Because he loves you. Because he's trying to make amends the only way he knows how. By manipulating my life without my knowledge? By making me think I was succeeding on my own when really, I was just another one of his charity projects. I don't think he sees it that way. I don't care how he sees it. She was shouting now. Everything I've accomplished in the past 3 months, I thought it was mine. I thought I was proving I could rebuild my life without him. But it was all a lie. He was pulling strings, playing puppet master, and I was too stupid to notice. Sweetheart, that's not. I have to go. She hung up before her father could argue. For a long moment, Ophelia sat perfectly still, processing this betrayal. Because that's what it was, another betrayal. Sebastian had taken away her agency, her ability to succeed independently. He'd made her entire recovery about him, about his guilt, about his need to feel like a good person. She grabbed her phone and unblocked Sebastian's number. Her fingers flew across the screen. Ophelia, I know what you did. The donations, the consultations, all of it. You had no right. The response came within seconds. Sebastian, can we talk? Please. Let me explain. Ophelia, there's nothing to explain. You manipulated my life because you couldn't handle your guilt. You made my success about you. Sebastian, that's not why I did it. I just wanted to help. Ophelia, I didn't want your help. I wanted to do this on my own. But you couldn't even give me that. Could you? You couldn't let me have one thing that wasn't tainted by you. Sebastian, I'm sorry. I thought I was removing obstacles, not taking credit for your work. The book is yours, Ophelia. The research, the writing, the brilliance, that's all you. Ophelia, but the opportunities weren't. And now I'll never know if I could have done it without you. Sebastian, you could have. You would have. I just made it easier. Ophelia, I don't want things to be easier. I wanted them to be mine. Do you understand? You've taken that away from me. Again. There was a long pause before his response. Sebastian, you're right. I overstepped. I shouldn't have interfered without your knowledge. I'm sorry. Ophelia, sorry isn't enough. It's never enough with you. She blocked his number again and threw her phone across the room. Have you ever had someone help you without asking, only to realize it made you feel powerless rather than supported? How did you handle it? Let us know below. Friday arrived with crisp December weather and a book launch Ophelia no longer wanted to attend. But she'd committed, and she refused to let Sebastian ruin this for her the way he'd ruined everything else. Blackwell's bookshop on Broad Street was packed. Colleagues from St. Hilda's, friends from university, her parents beaming with pride. Even some of James's former students had come, wanting to honor his memory by celebrating the work he'd helped inspire. Ophelia stood at the podium, her book displayed on tables throughout the store, and tried to focus on the victory rather than the hollowness. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice steadier than she felt. This book began as an academic exercise, an examination of how women in Arthurian legend have been misunderstood and misrepresented for centuries. But over the past year, it's become something more personal. She glanced at James's students in the front row. It's become a meditation on how we write our own stories, even when the world tries to write them for us. How we reclaim narratives that others have tried to control. How we insist on being the protagonists of our own lives, not supporting characters in someone else's tale. The audience applauded. Ophelia continued, speaking about Guinevere's political intelligence, Morgan's refusal to be diminished, the Lady of Shallott's fatal courage in choosing to see the world directly rather than through mediation. She was mid-sentence when she saw him. Sebastian stood in the back of the bookshop, half hidden behind a shelf. He wasn't trying to be noticed. He was just there, listening, supporting from a distance. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and Ophelia's carefully prepared speech evaporated. For a moment, they just looked at each other. All the pain, the anger, the love, the regret, it hung in the air between them, heavy and complex. Then Sebastian did something that surprised her. He mouthed 2 words. I'm sorry. And he turned to leave. Wait. The word was out before Ophelia could stop it. The crowd shifted, following her gaze. Sebastian froze at the door. Ophelia set down her notes. Her heart was pounding, her hand shaking, but suddenly she knew what she needed to say. Not to the crowd, but to him. There's someone here tonight who I didn't expect to see, she said. Someone who hurt me deeply. Who broke my heart in ways I'm still healing from. She could see her father's concerned expression, her mother's confusion. But she continued. For months, I've been angry at him. Furious at the way he walked away, at the way he chose fear over love. And then I found out that while I was rebuilding my life, he was helping behind the scenes. Paying for things, arranging access, making my path easier without telling me. Sebastian had turned back around. He looked terrified, like he was bracing for public humiliation. Part of me is still angry about that. Angry that he didn't trust me to succeed on my own. Angry that he tried to assuage his guilt by manipulating my life. She paused. But another part of me recognizes what he was really doing. The bookshop was absolutely silent. He was doing what he couldn't do before, putting my needs above his fear. He was helping me without expecting anything in return. Without demanding forgiveness or recognition. He was loving me the only way he knew how, even knowing I might never forgive him. Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't wipe them away. This book is about women reclaiming their narratives. About refusing to let others write our stories. And part of my story, a part I've been trying to deny, is that I still love a man who hurt me. Who terrified me. Who showed me how badly love can go wrong. She looked directly at Sebastian. But who's also shown me that people can change. That someone who runs from love can learn to run toward it instead. Sebastian's face was anguished. Ophelia. I'm not saying I forgive you, she said clearly. I'm not saying we're getting back together. I'm not even saying we'll ever be friends. But I am saying that I see what you've been trying to do. And I'm willing to have a conversation. A real one, where we're both honest about what went wrong and what might be possible. The crowd erupted in whispers, but Ophelia only had eyes for Sebastian. He crossed the bookshop slowly, like he was afraid sudden movement might shatter this fragile moment. When he reached her, he spoke quietly enough that only she could hear. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve a conversation or a chance or any of your time. No, you don't, she agreed. But maybe love isn't about deserving. Maybe it's about choosing to risk your heart even when you know it might break again. I won't break it again, Sebastian said fiercely. If you give me this chance, not to fix things, not to go back to how we were, but just to talk, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I've changed. Words are easy, Sebastian. Then let me show you with actions. Let me prove it day after day, week after week, for as long as it takes. His voice cracked. I love you, Ophelia. I've loved you this entire time. And I know I destroyed your trust, but if there's even the smallest possibility that you might someday trust me again, I'll wait. I'll wait forever if that's what it takes. Ophelia looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth in his eyes. The fear was still there. Would probably always be there. But it wasn't controlling him anymore. One conversation, she said finally. One honest conversation where you explain everything, and I decide if there's anything worth salvaging. Thank you. The words came out as prayer, as promise, as pure relief. Don't thank me yet. I'm still furious with you. You have every right to be. Patricia Chen cleared her throat loudly, breaking the spell. Perhaps we should save the rest of this conversation for after the book signing. The crowd laughed, the tension breaking. Ophelia wiped her tears and returned to the podium, her hand still shaking but her heart somehow lighter. Sebastian stayed for the entire event, standing in the back. Not intruding, not demanding attention. Just being there, the way he should have been all along. And when the last book was signed and the last guest had left, when it was just Ophelia and Sebastian in the empty bookshop surrounded by her words and her work, she finally said what needed to be said. I want to believe you've changed. I want to believe this could work. But I need time, Sebastian. I need you to understand that trust isn't rebuilt overnight. I know. Take all the time you need. And I need you to be honest. About everything. No more secrets, no more manipulating things behind my back, even with good intentions. I promise. Complete honesty, always. Why did you really do it? She asked. The donations, the help. Was it guilt? Or something else? Sebastian met her eyes. At first, it was guilt. I felt responsible for everything that happened. You being with James, the accident, all of it. But then it became something different. It became about loving you enough to help you succeed, even if you never knew, even if I never got credit. It was about proving to myself that I could put your needs first, the way I should have done a year ago. And now? What do you want now? A chance, he said simply. Not to go back to how things were. I know that's impossible. But a chance to build something new. Something better. Where we're both brave enough to be vulnerable, where we choose each other every day instead of running when things get scary. Ophelia considered this. The old Sebastian, the one who'd broken off their engagement, would never have said those words. Would never have been capable of that kind of emotional honesty. One dinner, she said. Next week. A real conversation where we lay everything out. And then I'll decide. Sebastian's smile was tentative, hopeful. One dinner. I'll take it. As he turned to leave, Ophelia called out, Sebastian. He looked back. The roses were beautiful. Even though I was angry, they were beautiful. His expression softened. White roses. Like the ones in the Lady of Shalot's hands. I remembered you loved that painting. He'd remembered. After everything, he'd remembered such a small detail about what she loved. Maybe, Ophelia thought, maybe there was hope after all. The week between the book launch and their dinner felt like the longest of Ophelia's life. She changed her mind a dozen times, convinced herself she was making a mistake, then convinced herself she'd regret not trying. Her mother told her to follow her heart. Her father warned her to be cautious. Her friends were split down the middle between give him another chance and run far, far away. In the end, Ophelia decided to trust herself. Not Sebastian. Not yet. But herself, her instincts, her ability to recognize genuine change, her strength to walk away again if necessary. They met at the Trout Inn in Wolvercote, a historic pub on the banks of the Thames, far enough from central Oxford to avoid prying eyes. It was neutral territory, a place that held no memories of their past relationship. Sebastian was already there when she arrived, sitting at a table overlooking the river. He stood when he saw her, and Ophelia was struck by how different he looked. Thinner, older somehow, with shadows under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. Thank you for coming, he said quietly. I'm here to listen. That's all I'm promising. That's more than I deserve. They ordered wine for both, though neither of them seemed interested in drinking, and then sat in uncomfortable silence as the server departed. You wanted honesty, Sebastian said finally. So let me start with the hardest truth. I was terrified of you. Ophelia's eyebrows rose. Of me. Of what you represented. My entire life, I've built walls. After my mother died, after watching my father become a shell, I promised myself I'd never give anyone that kind of power over me. I'd be successful, wealthy, admired, but never vulnerable. He met her eyes. Then I met you, and you made me feel things I'd spent 20 years trying to avoid. Real joy. Real connection. The possibility of a future that wasn't just empty achievement. So, you proposed. I proposed because I thought I could control it. I thought marriage would be like any other business arrangement, manageable, predictable. But as the wedding got closer, I started to panic. Every time you smiled at me, every time you talked about our future, I felt the walls crumbling. And it terrified me. So, you destroyed it before it could destroy you. Yes. The word was heavy with shame. I convinced myself I was doing you a favor. That you deserved better than someone as broken as me. But really, I was just a coward. Ophelia took a sip of wine, processing this. What changed? Why are you here now, saying all this? The accident. Sebastian's voice roughened. When Marcus called and told me you might have been in that car, that you might be dead, something inside me shattered. All those walls I'd built, all that protection, none of it mattered. Because the pain I felt in that moment was worse than anything I'd been trying to avoid. You realized you loved me. I realized I'd never stopped loving you. And that pushing you away hadn't protected me from pain, it had guaranteed it. He leaned forward. Ophelia, these past months have been the worst of my life. Not because of work or money or reputation, but because I wake up every day knowing I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. And the money, the behind-the-scenes help, was wrong. I see that now. I thought I was helping, but really, I was trying to control your narrative again. Trying to be the hero of your story instead of letting you be the hero of your own. He paused. Your speech at the book launch, when you talked about reclaiming narratives, it hit me hard. I'd been doing to you exactly what those medieval writers did to their female characters. Defining you through my lens instead of letting you define yourself. Ophelia felt tears prick her eyes. This was the honesty she'd needed. Not pretty words or grand gestures, but raw, painful truth. I'm still angry, she said. At all of it. The broken engagement, the manipulation, the way you made decisions about my life without consulting me. You have every right to be. But I also understand it better now. The fear, the walls, the self-sabotage. She twisted her napkin in her hands. I've spent 7 months being angry, and I'm tired of it. I don't want to carry that rage anymore. Are you saying you forgive me? I'm saying I'm willing to try. I'm willing to see if we can build something new, something that isn't haunted by what came before. She met his eyes. But I need conditions. Anything. First, therapy. Not couples therapy, individual therapy, for both of us. You need to work through your issues with vulnerability and loss. I need to work through my trust issues and the trauma from the accident. Done. I'll find someone this week. Second, we start over. Not as fiancés, not even as a couple getting back together. As two people dating, teaching each other again, with no expectations or timelines. Agreed. Third, complete honesty, always. If you're scared, you tell me. If you're having doubts, you tell me. No more running, no more making unilateral decisions. We communicate, or this doesn't work. I promise. And fourth, Ophelia's voice wavered. You have to accept that I might not be able to do this. That I might try and realize the hurt is too deep, that the trust is too broken. You have to respect my choice if I decide to walk away. This one clearly pained him, but he nodded. If you decide you can't forgive me, I'll accept it. I won't fight it or try to change your mind. Your healing is more important than my happiness. Ophelia exhaled slowly. Okay. Then let's try. The relief on Sebastian's face was profound. Thank you. God, Ophelia, thank you for giving me this chance. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be hard. Rebuilding trust is harder than building it the first time. I know. But I'm not going anywhere. However long it takes, whatever work is required, I'm in this. They talked for hours that night, sitting by the river as darkness fell. Sebastian told her about the therapy he'd already started, recognizing he needed help before he'd even known if she'd give him another chance. Ophelia told him about the nightmares from the accident, the survivor's guilt over James's death, the complicated grief of losing someone who'd been more than a friend but not quite a romantic partner. They talked about his mother, her childhood, the ways their pasts had shaped their fears. They talked about what they wanted from life, not just from each other, but from themselves. And slowly, cautiously, they began to rebuild. The next 6 months were a study in patience and perseverance. Sebastian kept his promise about therapy. He saw Dr. Richard Morrison, a trauma specialist, twice a week. The work was brutal, excavating childhood wounds, confronting the defense mechanisms he'd built, learning to sit with uncomfortable emotions instead of running from them. Ophelia found her own therapist, Dr. Sarah Whitmore, who helped her process the accident, the broken engagement, and the tangled mess of loving someone who'd hurt her deeply. They dated slowly. Coffee at the Grand Café, walks along the Cherwell, dinners at quiet restaurants where they could talk for hours. Sebastian never pushed for more, no pressure to stay over, no hints about moving in together, no talk of marriage. He showed up. That was the difference. When Ophelia had a panic attack triggered by a car backfiring, Sebastian held her hand and talked her through breathing exercises until she could function again. When his work stress made him want to retreat into isolation, he texted her instead, "I'm struggling today. Can we talk?" They learned to fight productively. When Ophelia discovered Sebastian had paid off her student loans entirely, another secret manipulation, they had a massive argument that ended with him genuinely understanding why unilateral financial decisions violated her autonomy. He set up a joint account where he deposited money for shared expenses, but only after they discussed and agreed upon what that meant. When Sebastian's father died unexpectedly in March, a heart attack, quick and merciless, Ophelia was there. She held him through the funeral, through the grief that reopened all his childhood wounds, through the terrifying realization that he was now the same age his father had been when his mother died. "I'm not going to become him," Sebastian whispered one night, clutching Ophelia in his penthouse. "I'm not going to let grief turn me into a shell." "No, you're not," Ophelia agreed. "Because you're doing the work. You're feeling the pain instead of running from it. That's the difference." Her book became a surprising success. Reclaiming Camelot, Women's Voices in Arthurian Legend got glowing reviews in academic journals and mainstream press alike. She was invited to give talks at universities across England. A podcast about medieval literature wanted her as a regular guest. Sebastian attended every public event, sitting in the back, applauding with genuine pride. He never tried to take credit or bask in her reflected glory. He just supported her, the way he should have from the beginning. What's the most important thing you've learned from a second chance at love? Share your wisdom in the comments. 8 months after their dinner at the Trout Inn, on a warm August evening, Sebastian invited Ophelia to his penthouse for dinner. She arrived to find the space transformed. Where there had once been minimalist grey and white, there was now color, throw pillows in deep blues and greens, photographs on the walls, including several of the two of them from recent months, fresh flowers on the table. "You redecorated," she said, surprised. "I realized this place felt like a museum, not a home. I wanted it to feel alive." He smiled. "You once suggested adding color. You were right." Over dinner, which Sebastian had cooked himself, an impressive feat for someone who'd once survived entirely on takeaway, they talked about Ophelia's upcoming research trip to France and Sebastian's decision to step back from day-to-day operations at Rothschild Ventures to focus on philanthropic work. "I want to do something meaningful with the money," he explained. "Something that helps people instead of just accumulating wealth. I'm thinking educational grants for students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Creating opportunities the way I did for you, but transparently, with proper foundations and oversight." "That sounds wonderful." After dinner, they moved to the balcony overlooking Oxford spires. The sunset painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. "Ophelia," Sebastian said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Her stomach tightened. This tone, it was serious. "I love you. I've told you that before, but I need you to understand what it means now, versus what it meant a year ago." He turned to face her fully. "A year ago, loving you terrified me. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. But now loving you feels like coming home. It feels safe and right and like the best decision I've ever made." Tears filled Ophelia's eyes. "Sebastian, I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm not even asking you to move in, though I'd love that someday. I'm just telling you that I'm committed to this. To us. To building a life together at whatever pace you need, with whatever boundaries you need." He took her hand. "You're not a risk I'm taking. You're the safest bet I've ever made." Ophelia couldn't speak. The words were everything she'd needed to hear. "I love you too," she finally managed. "And I trust you. It took time, and work, and so many difficult conversations. But I trust you now. I trust that you won't run when things get hard. I trust that you'll choose us, even when you're scared. Every time. I'll choose us every time." She kissed him then, and it felt like a beginning rather than a continuation. Not the desperate, passionate kiss of their early relationship, but something deeper. Something built on honesty and healing. When they pulled apart, Sebastian smiled, genuine and unguarded in a way he'd never been before. "There is one thing I want to ask," he said. Ophelia's heart skipped. "What?" "Move in with me. Not tomorrow, not next week. But start keeping things here. Start making this space ours instead of mine. Let's build a home together." It was such a simple request, but it meant everything. It meant permanence, commitment, a shared future. "Yes," Ophelia said. "Let's build something together." 1 year later, Christchurch Cathedral looked exactly as it had 18 months earlier, when Ophelia had been planning a wedding that never happened. The same stone arches, the same stained glass, the same sense of timeless beauty. But everything else was different. This time, Ophelia walked down the aisle in a simple ivory dress, her father beside her, toward a man who'd proven through actions that he was worthy of her trust. The guest list was smaller, only people who truly mattered, who'd supported them through the darkness. Marcus stood as Sebastian's best man, grinning broadly. Rebecca, Marcus's wife, was Ophelia's maid of honor, having become a close friend during the rebuilding process. When Ophelia reached the altar, Sebastian's eyes were wet with tears. "I never thought I'd get here," he whispered as she took his hands. "I thought I'd destroyed this forever." "You almost did," she whispered back. "But you didn't. You fought for us. That made all the difference." The ceremony was simple, heartfelt. When the vicar asked if anyone objected, there was only supportive silence. When Sebastian said his vows, words he'd written himself about vulnerability, trust, and choosing love over fear, there wasn't a dry eye in the cathedral. Ophelia's vows were about second chances, about the courage it takes to trust again, about building something stronger from broken pieces. "I never thought I'd stand here with you," she said. "After everything that happened, standing here felt impossible. But love isn't about never failing. It's about getting back up. It's about doing the work. It's about proving through actions that change is real." When they were pronounced husband and wife, when Sebastian kissed her with all the love and gratitude and fierce devotion he'd learned to express, the cathedral erupted in applause. At the reception in the Oxford Union's historic library, surrounded by books and friends and hope, Sebastian gave a speech that had everyone in tears. 18 months ago, I made the worst mistake of my life. I let fear control me, and I hurt the woman I loved more than anything. I spent months believing I destroyed any chance at happiness, that I deserved to be alone." He looked at Ophelia, his eyes shining. "But she gave me something I didn't deserve and hadn't earned, a second chance. And she made me work for it. She made me prove I'd changed, made me sit in uncomfortable truths, made me do the hardest work of my life." He raised his glass. "To my wife, yes, I get to call you that now, thank you for seeing potential in a broken man. Thank you for believing people can change. Thank you for teaching me that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the greatest strength there is. I'll spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice." Ophelia stood, her own glass raised. "To my husband, thank you for not giving up on us when I wanted to. Thank you for showing me that love isn't about never making mistakes, it's about making amends. Thank you for proving that people can change, that second chances can work, that broken things can be rebuilt into something even stronger." They clinked glasses, and the room erupted in cheers. Later, as they danced their first dance as husband and wife to a string quartet playing in the candlelit library, Sebastian pulled her close. "I'm never letting you go again," he murmured against her hair. "Good. Because I'm not going anywhere." "What changed your mind?" he asked. "What made you give me that second chance at the book launch?" Ophelia thought about it. "I realized that holding on to anger was just another way of letting you control my life. Forgiving you, or at least being open to forgiving you, that was taking my power back. And then you did the work. You didn't just say you changed. You proved it, day after day, for months. That's what made the difference. Best work I've ever done. Best investment you've ever made," she corrected with a smile. He laughed. "Absolutely." 3 years later, the Rothschild Hartwell Foundation occupied a beautiful renovated building on Parks Road, just steps from the Oxford University Parks. Inside, a team of dedicated staff processed applications for educational grants, mentorship programs, and research funding for students who might otherwise never have the opportunity to pursue higher education. Ophelia ran the Medieval Studies program, creating opportunities for young scholars to access rare manuscripts and expert consultation, the same resources that had saved her own book project. Sebastian oversaw the foundation strategy, using his business acumen for something meaningful. He'd stepped away from Rothschild Ventures entirely, finding more satisfaction in creating opportunities than in accumulating wealth. On a crisp October afternoon, Ophelia stood in their home office. The penthouse she'd once hated had become a warm, colorful space filled with books and laughter, reviewing applications when Sebastian appeared in the doorway. "There's someone here to see you." "Who?" He smiled mysteriously. "Come see." In the living room, a young woman in her early 20s stood nervously, clutching a folder. She had dark hair and determined eyes that reminded Ophelia painfully of James Ashford. "Miss Hartwell, I mean, Dr. Rothschild, I'm Emma Ashford. James Ashford's daughter." Ophelia's breath caught. "I didn't know James had a daughter. He and my mum divorced when I was young. But I read your book, the one you dedicated to him. And I wanted to say thank you." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know my dad well. He was always busy with his career. But reading your book, seeing how you talked about him, how he helped you, it helped me understand him better. Understand what mattered to him. James was a wonderful man, Ophelia said softly. I'm so sorry you lost him. I'm sorry you did too. Emma wiped her eyes. But I also came because I'm applying to graduate programs in medieval literature. Your book inspired me. And I wondered if the Rothschild-Hartwell Foundation might have any opportunities for someone like me. Ophelia and Sebastian exchanged a look. Actually, Ophelia said, we just opened a new mentorship program specifically for students pursuing medieval studies. It's named the James Ashford Fellowship. You'd be a perfect candidate. Emma's face lit up. Really? Oh my God, that would be incredible. As they discussed the program details, Sebastian slipped his arm around Ophelia's waist. She leaned into him, grateful for the journey that had brought them here. The pain, the heartbreak, the slow rebuilding, all of it had led to this moment. To a foundation helping hundreds of students. To a marriage built on honesty and hard-won trust. To a life that honored James's memory by creating opportunities for others. To second chances that actually worked. That evening, after Emma left with a fellowship application and renewed hope, Ophelia and Sebastian sat on their balcony watching the sunset over Oxford spires. Do you ever think about how different things could have been? Sebastian asked. If I hadn't ended our engagement, if you hadn't nearly died in that accident, if I hadn't fought to win you back. Sometimes. But I try not to dwell on alternate timelines. Ophelia took his hand. This version, messy and painful as it was, brought us here. To a relationship built on real trust instead of just passion. To work that actually matters. To a life we built together instead of one you controlled. No regrets. 1,000 regrets about the pain. But none about where we ended up. She smiled. You paid the price, like the title of my story promised. You lost me, had to watch me move on, almost lost me permanently. That was your karma for breaking my heart. And then destiny gave me a second chance. No, Ophelia corrected. We gave each other a second chance. Destiny just provided the circumstances. We did the work. Sebastian kissed her temple. Best work of my life. In the distance, church bells rang across Oxford, the same bells that had rung at their wedding, the same bells that had tolled for James Ashford's funeral, the same bells that had marked every significant moment in this city's long history. And in their warm, colorful home filled with books and hope and hard-won happiness, Sebastian and Ophelia Rothschild sat together, watching the day fade into night, grateful for broken things that had been rebuilt stronger, for hearts that had learned to trust again, for love that had survived its own destruction to become something better. The billionaire had paid the price for his cruelty. But more importantly, he'd done the work to deserve redemption. And in the end, that made all the difference. 5 years after their wedding, on a snowy December evening, Ophelia stood in the Bodleian Library, the same library where Sebastian had proposed the first time, watching her husband read to a group of disadvantaged children participating in the Foundation's holiday literacy program. He sat cross-legged on the floor, his expensive suit forgotten, animatedly narrating a story about King Arthur and his knights. The children were transfixed. This was the man she'd chosen to love. Not the polished billionaire in his penthouse, but this version, open, vulnerable, using his privilege to create opportunities for others. Their journey hadn't been easy. But the best things never are. Sebastian looked up, caught her eye, and smiled, that unguarded smile that still made her heart skip. She smiled back, touching the simple gold band on her finger. Some stories don't end with the first happily ever after. Some stories require breaking apart and rebuilding, require learning to trust again, require choosing love over fear again and again and again. But those stories, the ones forged in fire and rebuilt from ashes, those are the ones that last. What's your biggest takeaway from Sebastian and Ophelia's journey? What does their story teach us about love, forgiveness, and second chances? Drop your final thoughts below. We'd love to hear what resonated with you most. Thank you for reading Rachel and Bob's story. If their journey of healing, second chances, and choosing yourself resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more emotional, real-life inspired stories. Remember, you're never too broken to begin again. See you in the next story. Blue Heart.